We are just now hearing for the first time from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt answering questions from reporters about Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Moments ago, she was asked about the latest Signal group chat controversy involving the Secretary of Defense. Let's listen.
Secretary of Defense is doing a tremendous job, and he is bringing monumental change to the Pentagon. And there's a lot of people in this city who reject monumental change, and I think, frankly, that's why we've seen a smear campaign against the Secretary of Defense since the moment that President Trump announced his nomination before the United States Senate. Let me reiterate, the President stands strongly behind Secretary Hegseth and the change that he is bringing to the Pentagon, and the results that he's achieved thus far speak for themselves.
Is there an FBI investigation?
Let's discuss with Democratic Congressman from Washington State, Adam Smith. He is the ranking member on the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman, thanks so much for sharing part of your afternoon with us. I want you to react to what you just heard there from the press secretary, that this is part of a coordinated smear campaign. Hegseth himself earlier today saying that essentially this is disgruntled employees. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, what monumental change is Ms. Leavitt talking about? I follow this fairly closely at the Pentagon. Nothing much has changed at the Pentagon in terms of making it more efficient, making it more effective. You know, the war in Gaza goes on. We, started bombing in Yemen. There's been no significant improvements in acquisition or procurement. So the only change that we've seen is an effort to ban books and fire people that Trump thinks are disloyal to him. And we've seen this throughout the Pentagon. They're not just banning books, they're banning words. Apparently you can't say the word gay anywhere in the Department of Defense anymore. They fired C.Q. Brown, an incredibly qualified chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So I would challenge them, what monumental change are you talking about that has anything to do with improving the national security of this country or making the Pentagon more efficient and more effective? We don't see any of that. We see a lot of the purging of people based on loyalty. And again, we see all of the book banning and the culture war. But how is that bringing about monumental change, number one? Number two, evidence is pretty clear here. I mean, they shared the first group chat with a reporter who showed very clearly that Secretary Hegseth was sharing sensitive, classified information right before a military attack, and they chose to ignore that. So I don't know what they're talking about in saying that he's bringing about monumental change, and that's why people are criticizing him.
The Pentagon maintains, Congressman, that nothing that was shared was classified. You obviously have reason to think that there were sensitive materials, that it should be classified. I wonder what you make, in Hegseth's words, of him sharing, quote, informal, unclassified coordinations for media coordinations and other things via Signal. Is it appropriate for him to be doing that with his brother, his wife, and his personal attorney?
Yeah, I don't know what he means by that, but I can't imagine anything within the internal workings of the Pentagon that you need to be sharing on a Signal chat with your wife or your attorney or your brother. So, I mean, that's just not appropriate to set that up in the first place. But second, let's go back to that first chat where you showed Secretary Hegseth saying when we were going to attack, where we were going to attack, and what we were going to attack with an hour or so prior to an attack. If Secretary Hegseth doesn't think that that kind of information should be classified, then we've got a much, much bigger problem in that he doesn't fundamentally understand a key aspect of his job.
To be clear, both his brother Phil Hegseth and Tim Parlatore, the Secretary's attorney, work at the Pentagon. Do you have any issues with that?
Sorry, again, we don't really know, and you're right, that was a bit of an overstatement. If in fact these are people who work at the Pentagon and have need for that information, that's fine. But it's mostly non-specific. We don't know why, and I certainly don't know why his wife would be on a formal chat like that. But we just don't know enough about what's happening on that piece of it. But we do know what was on that one Signal chat, as I mentioned before. And again, I did not initially call for Secretary Hegseth to resign when the Signal chat came out. I called for him to resign when he reacted to it by saying, we're not going to do anything about it. This is standard operating procedure, nothing to see here, no big deal. I mean, if he wasn't even going to try to fix it, look, I mean, classified sensitive information, it can be difficult. On the House Armed Services Committee, every once in a while, things will come out. We'll have to remind members that we're in a classified setting, don't say this. But to do that and then say, no, this is just the way we're going to do things, and to make no effort to fix it, to make no effort to improve operational security when you have such a clear flaw in it, I mean, that's just incompetent.
Congressman, it struck me that Dan Caldwell, one of the DOD aides that Hegseth fired, expressed some doubt to Tucker Carlson about whether there was actually an investigation into leaking. And as you heard from, or you may have not heard, but Secretary Hegseth was really digging in on this idea that they were going to crack down on leaks at the Pentagon earlier today. But here, Caldwell says that there's a lot of evidence that there is not a real investigation. How do you make sense of that? Would you have him and some of these others that were fired come in and testify before House Armed Services?
We should, and certainly I'm going to press the majority to do that. I mean, sadly, the Republicans are in the majority. They would have to make that decision. Now, we're going to have a hearing next week on a resolution of inquiry that I filed to ask some of these questions, so we will have a public discussion about it. But the biggest thing I make of this is, I don't think there is an investigation. I think there's a purge. I mean, Donald Trump made no mistake about it. He ran for a second term as president because he wants vengeance on his enemies. And that's certainly playing out across the government in a wide variety of ways, pulling security details and security clearances from people he perceives to be his enemies. So I think Mr. Caldwell's probably right. What's happening at the Pentagon is probably more of a purge, just to try to make sure that people stay loyal. And understand the two-step process there. One, yes, you fire people that the president perceives as not being loyal. But the other thing is when you fire those people, it has a chilling effect on everybody else. Everybody else who stays knows if I want to keep my job, it's not about doing the job well. It's not about representing the American people, protecting national security. It's about being absolutely loyal to Donald Trump. So I think Mr. Caldwell's probably right. It's more of a purge than an investigation.
But quickly, Congressman, my understanding from reading the reporting is that these folks were actually hired by Secretary Hegseth. So what does that tell you?
Yeah, well, I guess that gets to my second point that, I mean, if you're willing to fire anyone, that really sort of amps up the chilling message. But there's an aspect of it I don't fully understand. Maybe Secretary Hegseth believed that they had been leaking or somehow weren't loyal in some way. But I think the overarching thing that says is it points to the articles that have been written and the people who have been quoted about the level of chaos going on at the Pentagon. And whatever Ms. Leavitt has to say, it doesn't seem to be that they're bringing about monumental change. They're just doing a bad job of running a very important organization right now. And I think we all need to hope that they get better.
Congressman Adam Smith, thanks for sharing your point of view.
Thanks for giving me the chance. I appreciate it.
Of course.